Welcome back everybody, my name is Tucker, and in today's video I'm creating a video resume type thing for the open Bulls GM position or director of personnel, whatever the report was that came out yesterday. Essentially the Bulls are looking for a new person to be in charge of their front office, and so today I am creating a mock interview for that position. And you know it's serious when not only did I fix my hair, but I also wore a nice shirt for today's video. But really quickly before we get started, if you enjoy the NBA, then consider subscribing. I upload basically every single day. For the last 8 seasons, including this most recent one, the Chicago Bulls have been some combination of slightly above average, average, or downright terrible. And this is a team and a franchise that is supposed to be one of the true pillars of the NBA. And for me, anything other than championship contention for the Chicago Bulls is simply unacceptable. So I'm going to go ahead and evaluate the 2 things that I think are most important when you're overtaking a GM position, and that is the roster as well as the payroll. And then I'm going to outline 2 specific plans later on in the video about how exactly I would move forward with this roster if I was given the position. So one point does need to be made here quickly before we get to the rest of this, and that's that Jim Boylan doesn't need to be the head coach of the Chicago Bulls anymore. I know it, you know it, the entire league knows that he is not the coach that needs to be leading this team. The players don't like him, he's not a great X's and O's guy, and you just know that when you're thinking about this team as a championship contender, Jim Boylan is not the head coach of that team. He needs to go, plain and simple. And now as we look to the roster, there are some things that I like. I think the front court combination is almost ideal for the modern NBA when you're looking at Wendell Carter Jr. and Lauri Markkanen. When healthy, I think that is a front court combination that can be outstanding and at a championship level depending on the other pieces around them in the modern NBA. You have 2 players that can potentially play the 5 individually, but you also have 2 guys that can play together, giving you the versatility to go small with one of them at the 5 or to be a little bit bigger to have both of them playing together because of Lauri's scoring and shooting ability and Wendell Carter Jr.'s ability to be so versatile on the defensive end and continue to grow and develop his offensive game. That fit and that combination, along with their youth and their upside, is a really exciting aspect of this roster for me, and I absolutely think that they're keepers as long as they can prove that they can stay healthy, which I'm confident they'll be able to do over the next few seasons. In terms of other positives on this roster, I don't necessarily know what Coby White is going to be long term, but I want to stick around and find out what that is going to be. Had a few up and down moments during his rookie season, but towards the tail end of it started to really come on as a really good scorer for this team, and I want to continue to see what he's going to develop into. It's very clear that he can score the ball at the NBA level as he has done throughout his entire career at the high school as well as the college level, and I want to see how he is going to continue to develop and grow, and that's something that I definitely want to prioritize along with the development of Markkanen and Carter Jr. And then last up, in terms of a bright spot on this roster, I do want to highlight Otto Porter Jr. because even though in the past he's been seen as one of the more overpaid players throughout the league, he's at the very least a professional 3-and-D type guy that provides a nice veteran presence on this roster, and as a bonus is a nice trade piece as well, given the fact that he will be on an expiring contract soon. So Otto Porter, both in terms of a player as well as an asset, I think is a really big positive on this roster. And that's pretty much it for the positives. And now as we move to the negatives, you'll notice that one player I didn't mention in the first section is Zach Lavine. And it's pretty simple. I don't think that he's proven to be a winning type player in the NBA. He's never been healthy on a good team in his 5 seasons to this point, and maybe you could blame that on the situations that he's been in, and that's fine, but I'd rather another team pay for him and find out whether he is or is not a winning player rather than keep him around and inhibit some of the other plans that I have for this roster. Maybe it's something that he hasn't been able to help situationally, but again, I would rather just move on from him at this point. And I don't really think that other players really want to play with him that much either, at least other really good players that are going to want the ball in their hands and are going to be able to score. I just don't think he's the kind of guy that fits well on a championship roster as a complimentary option, because he's certainly not a number 1 on a championship roster, and I'd be more than happy to move on from him. And quite frankly, I like his trade value a lot better right now, given the fact that he has 2 years left on his contract, than I do his on the court value. And as we move on to the other pieces on the roster, everybody else is either old, overpaid, or unproven, which puts all of them, in addition to Zach Lavine, very firmly in the trade asset category for me. And then you can also throw in Otto Porter, although that is most of the value that I see him in initially, and that's why he was in the positive section to begin with. And now as we move on to the payroll sheet and the contracts on this roster, I think the Bulls are actually in a very good position, and I don't see any reason why they can't be big threats in free agency in 2021 and beyond. Keep in mind that back in 2010, they almost got some combination of Chris Bosh, Carmelo Anthony, LeBron James, and Dwayne Wade. And if this past summer teams like the Brooklyn Nets and the LA Clippers can sign big free agents, there's no reason that the Chicago Bulls, given the correct circumstances, can't do the exact same thing. And it's been proven over the last handful of seasons that you need a couple of things to be a legit free agency destination. It's not just the name, it's not just the franchise, although that helps. You need a couple of things. You need competent ownership, you need nice complementary options that are already there on the roster that work well with star players and they can see themselves playing well with, and you need a ton of cap space in which these players can create their own situation and bring whoever they would like to with them as another option. And I think that that is a path that the Chicago Bulls can definitely follow when you're looking at this payroll sheet, because pretty much everybody on this roster is going to have their contract expired by 2021, or it's non-guaranteed, or they're on a rookie deal unless their name is Thaddeus Young. And so to have this level of potentially really strong complementary young talent on this roster, Coby White, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter Jr., in addition to only having one kind of bad long-term contract on the roster in Thaddeus Young, all work together to create a really nice potential free agency situation moving forward for the Bulls. And so all in all, I actually think that this is a team and a roster and a payroll sheet that's relatively well put together to be a championship contender within the next 3 to 4 seasons if things are executed properly. But there's one big issue here, and that's that there is not a single player on this roster that would end up being the best player on a championship caliber team in the NBA. There's no true number one guy on a team that could actually contend for a championship. You need a top 10, maybe you could stretch it to top 15 player on your team in the NBA, in the modern league, to be able to compete. And that guy simply isn't on this roster. And so that's the number one goal here, is to get one of those guys in a situation where there are still complementary pieces around him. And that is how you reach this level of championship contention. And the way that you do that in the modern NBA is to either sign one in free agency or to get one in the draft, which now brings me to this point where I'm going to explain my two potential paths. The first one being continuing to try and quote unquote tank, or at least prioritize the development of these younger players in order to try and get a high draft pick, not a 7th overall pick, not a 10th overall pick. There's plenty of those on this roster, but a top 3 pick that could allow you to bring in a truly transformational player. That is certainly an option, and that is a path that this team has been on for the last few seasons. But that personally would not be my preference. What I would prefer is option number 2. And that involves prioritizing not only the development of those 3 core young players that I continue to mention, Coby White, Lauri Markkanen, and Wendell Carter Jr., but also cap space in 2021 and beyond. I don't really care about any of the other players on this roster outside of those 3 guys, and I would prioritize getting value in return for those players whose contracts run out before the summer of 2021, while also not adding any kind of long-term salary. If there is a Zach Lavine, an Otto Porter, a Thaddeus Young, a Thomas Satoransky, anybody else on this roster trade available that will allow me to bring in draft compensation and or nice young players on cheap contracts or non-long-term contracts, those are all moves I would be willing to make. Because what that allows you to do, and what the primary goal here would be, is to get to the summer of 2021 with Wendell Carter Jr. and Coby White both still on rookie deals, and then you have Lauri Markkanen as a restricted free agent that offseason and 2 full max cap space slots available in the summer of 2021, and ideally some draft compensation to make additional moves as well. And so then what you have is a situation in which there's a ton of high-level free agents available in the summer of 2021. You have 3 nice young complementary players that are on the roster that other guys can see themselves playing with and succeeding with, and you have this blank canvas of all this cap space in which some combination of free agents could see themselves playing in what is a very prestigious city as well as NBA franchise in the Chicago Bulls. And one point that I don't want to just move past here, and I want to reiterate, is getting that extra compensation and those extra young players in exchange for guys like Zach Lavine and Otto Porter Jr. Because what that allows you to do is not just have this pitch of we've got these 3 young players and 2 max cap space slots, but also we have the ammunition to bring in a 3rd star or trade for a guy that you want to play with, similar to how the Clippers traded for Paul George. They had the young assets to be able to make that happen. You want to set yourself up to look like as promising of a situation as possible with a combination of young players and assets 2 potential superstar free agents. This franchise has plenty of young talent already, and it just needs those 1 or 2 really high-level NBA players that you need to contend for a championship. And I think that is a realistic scenario. Again, if teams like the Clippers and the Nets can be big free agency destinations this past summer, there's no reason that with the proper moves that the Chicago Bulls can't do the exact same thing in the summer of 2021 and beyond. Now, is this some kind of guarantee where suddenly we're going to be championship contenders within the next 3 or 4 years? Of course not. There's no plan that anybody would come in with and say, this is going to guarantee us an opportunity to compete for an NBA championship in 2022 and 23. That's not realistic. But this, in my opinion, gives this franchise, a franchise that deserves to be successful in the NBA, is a much better place when the Bulls are successful. This is a way that gives this team, this franchise, the best possible chance to be back on top as true championship contenders, rather than just continually spinning the wheels in this middle ground of average and mediocrity that this roster and this franchise have been, struggling with for the last 8 or so years. And so essentially that is my plan, and that is my pitch to be the next GM of the Chicago Bulls. And there you have it. That is going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.